Welcome everyone to the August Planning Commission Agenda Review meeting. At this time, I will turn it over to Director Brooks.
Good morning, everyone. Can everyone hear me? Okay. Thank you. Just a few updates. They're mainly associated with some staffing changes that we've had. We've had a few additional staff transitions in recent weeks. We've said goodbye to a couple staff. We've welcomed a new addition, and we promoted a few staff into leadership roles. So Ellen Zaviska, some of you may or may not know her, but she's had been with the agency for almost 18 years. She was a planner in our transportation group, and she has left to pursue an opportunity with the Association of Metropolitan Planning Organization. Ellen, some of you may recall, really had a passion for safety for all roadway users, and she really did a lot of data analysis and took a leadership role around safe routes to school. And she spent a lot of time engaging across city and county departments as well as across the region. So we're really going to miss her and her contributions to our work, but we're really excited for her and her new role at AMPO. And several of us will still interact with her, and she's not leaving Knoxville, so that's a good thing. We are currently hiring a GIS analyst, Jace Swain Crowley, who you all probably haven't met. He's one of our behind-the-scenes folks. Recently left for a job and to pursue graduate studies in Maryland. So we will be filling that position. And David Hobbs has joined our team since the last meeting. He is working on the addressing team along with Madison Lewis. So staff promotions. Lindsay has been promoted to Principal Planner and Design Review Program Manager. This really is in recognition of her years of experience and her exceptional work leading the Historic Zoning Commission as well as the Design Review Board. And she will continue to serve in a leadership role with those boards and then within a more specialized segment of the agency's work program. So it'll include development review, historic preservation, urban design, housing, as well as community facilities. So really excited to have her serve in that role. Allie Ketron, she occasionally presents to this body. She has been promoted to our strategic planning and communications manager. This is a new position, and it involves work that she's already been undertaking for the last several years, which is related to public relations and dissemination of information, managing our web team, as well as our graphics team. And she'll continue to work with our staff, media, citizen groups, other agencies, businesses, to help improve understanding of what we do and why we do it, and how we can better partner with them. So this position will work closely with me to identify strategic initiatives to fulfill our mission as an agency, as well as serving as the planning agency for the city and county. So excited to have her take that on. Andrea Keffer has been promoted to supervisor of the addressing and subdivision teams. You all, again, she's sort of one of the behind-the-scenes folks, so you probably don't interact with her very much, but this is a really important role, and we're really excited to have her take on that leadership. And that's it for staff updates right now. The 2023 Facts and Figures report is now available on our website. This is something that we do annually, and it reports on natural, commercial, cultural features of the Knoxville area. I will send out a link to this after this meeting, so if you all want to take a deeper dive into that, I really encourage you to do so. It's some really great information. So plats. Again, I want to thank those of you who were able to attend our special called meeting to address the state law change. Really appreciate you all taking the time to do that. I also just wanted to make you all aware that with that change in state law, the Planning Commission will now begin seeing plats with more than 25 lots on the agenda, even if no variance to the subdivision regulations are requested. And so just as a reminder, because you all typically haven't been seeing these for the last 5 or 6 years, a final plat is the official survey instrument to be placed in the public records of the Knox County Register of Deeds following approval and certification by this body or planning staff as authorized by state law. So a final plat is required for all major and minor subdivisions. And a final plat cannot be submitted until the concept plan has been approved by this body and the design plan has been approved by staff. That would be planning staff and the appropriate department, so it could be city or county, per the subdivision regulations. And really what's within your authority is to either approve or deny the plat. And if the commission fails to approve or disapprove a final plat, let me back up. You all must approve it once it's on your agenda within 60 days or deny it after that initial consideration. So again, you're really just looking at it to make sure that that it complies with the concept plan, design plan that had been previously approved.
I have a question.
Yes.
If for some unforeseen reason a plat was denied, what happens to the project and the plat after that?
I mean, the applicant can't appeal it, but otherwise it's denied, so they can't move forward. Yeah, Chancery Court. Yes, that's correct. They can appeal it to Chancery Court. That's a good question for the final plat. Yeah, they'd have to go back through the concept plan process of the whole.
That's what I was getting at.
Yeah.
Like, are they able to make a modification and come back to review that plat, or is it denied and it has to go back to a much earlier part of the project?
Our recommendation would be for them to go back through. Otherwise, I mean, they can't just keep reintroducing, what they had proposed. So yes, they'd have to make some changes. Any other questions, concerns, clarifications? So we'll get started with the review of agenda items, and I'll turn it over to, actually, no, I'm sorry. Forgot about you, Mike, over there. Yeah, so Mike is going to present the Regional Roadway Safety Action Plan. The TPO staff and consultants recently completed this Roadway Safety Action Plan, and it was adopted last month. And again, this is something that Ms. Zaviska had worked on, and I appreciate Mike for taking the time to present this to you all.
Thank you, Amy. Yeah. Again, my name is Mike Conger, and I'm on planning staff, but primarily deal with the transportation planning organization side of things. So you guys don't see me too often at your meetings. And again, Ellen Zaviska took the lead on this. I was really very indirect role. So I'm going to do my best to go through these slides, and I apologize in advance if my knowledge is not as good as hers on this overall effort here. So where this comes from, the Regional Roadway Safety Action Plan is from the Federal Highway Administration's special funding source called Safe Streets and Roads for All, acronym SS4A. Federal Highway loves acronyms. We deal with that a lot in TPO. But what this is $5 billion nationwide over a 5-year period for planning and implementation to improve roadway safety. We got a jump start on this. We actually use local funds to do the plan, whereas most agencies apply for a planning grant, spending a couple years, get the certified plan for this to be able to apply for real projects on the ground implementation. So we're in position where we were able to apply for actual projects for the second round of funding, whereas most agencies like ours are still in the planning phase. So we felt like that was a big benefit to doing that. In the plan, we do make a commitment to reduce fatal and serious injury crashes by 2/3 by 2045. Federal Highway wants you to set an actual target with this plan. Whether or not we can get there will remain to be seen. We have a long way to go. If folks have been seeing in the news, it seems like every other day now there's been a fatal crash on, mostly on interstates or even on, I think, Ebenezer Road recently. So we have a big challenge with that. And so it does result in prioritized list of strategies and projects. And I should also mention City of Knoxville did a plan in conjunction with ours, a Vision Zero plan, where they're actually targeting 0 fatal crashes by 2040, I believe is the time frame. So it was a parallel effort done by our consultants with that. Oh, there are some bullet points. Again, this is kind of new to me, the PowerPoint. So from Federal Highway Administration, they're kind of promoting the safe system approach. They know that we're not going to reduce all fatalities just looking at one aspect of the problem. With the roads, it's also behavior. We see a lot of driving under influence, texting and driving, other factors. We got to look at the roadway and the user, and also even post-crash care. And the root of the issue we see is that speeds are a major factor. High speed really tremendously increases the chances of a major serious injury or fatal crash. So especially at the neighborhood level and lower streets. We need to try to focus on addressing speeds as much as we can. So what this is, a data-driven plan to really focus in on where the issues are in the system with historical crash data, which we have a wealth of that available to us, thankfully through the state, Tennessee DOT, Tennessee Highway Safety Office allows us access to all the crash data. And the consultants compiled this into the, looking at each segment of road. What we've identified here is that only 1.7% of the regional streets account for close to 30% of the injury crashes. So those gives us our target areas. City of Knoxville, we did separately. There's even more dramatic as far as the roadway network coverage is 5% of their street system accounts for 63%. These are all, they're major arterials, typically state routes. So TDOT is a major partner in this, and they've been engaged throughout. We're working with them to address these also. So we also looked at a sort of predictive approach. We don't always want to be reactive with crashes. We want to see what are the factors causing these crashes, and then look at the roadways that exhibit those same characteristics and maybe predict where they might occur. So we've identified these crash profiles both in Knoxville and the region. So some common factors again that we could look at. One thing, left turn, U-turn related at signalized intersections and pedestrian bicyclists in commercial areas along arterials. That's in the city, and then regional. I see that these symbols are reversed. There's a nighttime issue that we see showing up in the data that I guess the moon should be up here. And then also with the roadway curvature, you get regional, rural characteristics. In our area, we have a lot of rural roads with no shoulders and sharp curves and those type of things. So trying to address those. And then finally, we do see a lot of motorcycle. Obviously, when a motorcycle is involved in a crash, it typically is pretty serious and often fatal. So with predictive analysis, again, we have all this data at our disposal, and with GIS, you can plug that all in and see where things are and correlate with one another with the roadway attributes and traffic and all of that. So we've identified some of the major roadways where these predictive factors would show that there's likely to be crashes occurring. And then I know this is a very busy map here, but this is all plotted in GIS, so each roadway segment is given kind of a predictive score and a color code to correlate that, where if it's a low probability but high crashes, those are in blue. So those are, this is a model we've created. So obviously the model doesn't include every variable correlated with crashes, but we want to look at these and see what's going on with the roadways. Obviously, where there's a high probability and a high crash rate, that's showing what we would expect to occur there. So with this, we can be hopefully proactive again and find projects to address issues before they become a real issue. City of Knoxville, same thing. So also in the plan, there's an action plan framework organized around these themes of design, land use plans, policy, and programs. So it's not just identifying roadway projects, it's identifying other factors and policies and things. So in here, I won't go through all of these. There's like 30 different ones that have been identified, and there's this legend here that shows you what the timeline might be to implement that, how easy it is to do, who would take the lead, and how much it would cost, and those type of things. So this is all laid out in the plan, and it's posted to our website for folks that want to dig into it. I did just put in these short-term land use ones. Obviously, this body is involved with land use, so I threw these in here. There's I think 3 of them that we've identified. They all are somewhat related to the vulnerable road user, we call it. Those are bicyclists, pedestrians, and looking at land use policies to try to reduce their exposure to risk. So one thing is, reductions to off-street parking requirements to hopefully promote better multimodal access, less vehicular traffic in those areas where it makes sense. Requiring new developments to consider bicycle and pedestrian impacts. I think we're already doing a lot of that. We do that when we review concept plans and look at that aspect. Also, expanding bicycle parking requirements where it's appropriate. So that's just a few of those I just barely want to touch on today. I don't want to go into a whole lot of time or detail. Then the one thing that folks are mostly interested in, what are we going to try to get on the ground for implementation with this? The deadline for the grant funding application was like July 12th, so last month. It was a big rush to get the plan finalized, adopted, and get this project submitted. So at the regional level, we did apply for $7.2 million in federal funds. I think the cap was around $10 million that you were allowed to apply for. We did identify, in conjunction with Knox County, I wish Jim was here, he could tell you more about these projects, but the county was especially involved in here and wanted to get some projects on county roads, even though most of our stuff, again, showed up as state road in terms of what's happening, historical. But through the predictive analysis, we were able to show that where's the need for these in the county-owned roadways. So there's 7 projects in Knox County, 1 in Oak Ridge, 1 in Maryville. We also applied for a regional safety messaging grant where we try to get public information out again on the behavioral side of things, and Anderson County, a separate study for them. City of Knoxville did apply for a separate aspect for 2 projects on city streets. I think theirs was around $10 million. One's on North Broadway, Woodland Avenue. These are actually projects already under development with some greenway connections and I think a road diet for Woodland Avenue through here. So these are already underway. They're hoping that the fact that the projects have some activities underway, that the federal government will look more favorably on ones that are more shovel ready, not exactly shovel ready, but they have been through some of the process, so a little further along. And then finally, some issues that arose that seen at Magnolia Avenue. We've seen several major crashes on that corridor recently, and so they're targeting, I think, at Cherry Street, and I forget the name of the note. It's hard to see on here, but okay, Cherry Street and then Hembry Street. So I don't have a lot of the details on these projects, but we can follow up if you have questions. And I think that's all I had. So that's a real quick overview. And again, check it out online and reach out to us if you have questions. So can you take that? Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Mike. That's also another link that I'll add to that email that I'll send out this afternoon. So as Lindsay's getting set up, I'll just provide a couple introductory remarks here. So this is the first time Lindsay's going to go over several requests for ordinance amendments. This is the first time in recent memory that, or maybe ever, that we've received a request for this many amendments to the code. And I would call them fairly significant, or they would be fairly significant requests. So Lindsay, with assistance from Michelle and Deputy Director Brian Berry, have done a great job, in my opinion, in a fairly short amount of time, of analyzing the proposed amendments for your consideration today and on Thursday. I think it's also important to mention that, as you may recall, planning led a missing middle housing analysis last summer on behalf of the City of Knoxville with support from the Knoxville Area Realtors Association, or East Tennessee Realtors Association. That's correct, right? Yeah, they just rebranded. So as indicated in the letter found in your packet from Deputy to the Mayor, Aaron Gill, addressing opportunities for reducing barriers to increasing the housing supply and increasing diversity of housing in the city is a high priority. And since the spring, the city and planning staff have been working closely together to utilize the missing middle housing scan to help inform the development of recommendations to be considered later this fall. And so now I'll turn it over to Lindsay to walk you through the request.
And we're having some screen difficulties on that one, so we may need to refer to the TV screen over there. So as Amy introduced, this is a really unique situation of citizen-proposed amendments to the City of Knoxville zoning code. These amendments focus on residential districts, accessory dwelling units, the CN, Commercial Neighborhood District, parking and landscaping requirements. So there are 5 amendments. They're divided by article of the zoning code, and they'll require 5 votes from you, the commission. I have a note here on the screen that has an explainer of the case file organization, as there is a lot of complex information that's provided with all this. So just to give you guys some context, there is an overall memo that has the staff recommendation that applies to each case, along with background information on the recommended process to address missing middle housing. There are memos provided by the City of Knoxville, and then there's an individual case file for each amendment. So that includes the proposed amendment text from the applicant, planning staff analysis, and then analysis provided by the city plans review and inspection staff. So I'm going to begin by giving y'all some context for the staff recommendation, and then I'll run through the individual amendments. The staff recommendation is that planning staff recommends zoning code amendments to enable middle housing in the city follow the implementation process that was defined by our consultant, Opticos, in the September missing middle housing scan. So you'll probably hear me referring to it as the scan, the middle housing scan, throughout this presentation. We are recommending a comprehensive process, so it'll go beyond selected tweaks to the existing zoning code. It'll also include a review of the relevant adopted plans to ensure that the code updates align with the adopted plans. And then it will also include an intensive review of the code to avoid unintended discrepancies or errors. So when you change one thing, you have to make sure you update it in other locations. I'm going to break this down briefly on the slides to follow, and there is more detail in Exhibit A in the staff memo, but based on the recommendations of the missing middle scan, the process will focus on a target area that's naturally supportive to middle housing forms. It will include dimensional and design standards that ensure house-scale buildings that are compatible with the existing neighborhood context, and then we want to encourage retention of the existing houses via conversions or additions. The process will also incorporate public input. That's a big part of this as well. So just a very brief refresher on the missing middle definition, and I would refer you guys to this scan. It's available on our website under Plans and Studies. But the definition here is missing middle is house-scale buildings with multiple units in walkable neighborhoods. So to really thoughtfully incorporate that in our city, we need to make zoning code updates to address each component of that: house scale, multiple units on those existing lots, and then walkable neighborhoods. So part of the process, along with planning's information services staff and the GIS analysts, we have already identified walkable environments that are described as either ideal or appropriate for missing middle housing. One can accommodate them immediately, and one could accommodate them with infrastructure improvements. And so that's the map on the left that's showing the centers and corridors, the walkable environments in Knoxville. These are both in the scan, these graphics, so I would definitely encourage y'all refer to those. These neighborhoods have the characteristics that are shown on the screen on the right. So they have proximity to amenities and mixed-use areas. The neighborhoods have bike and pedestrian routes, transit. You can see smaller block sizes.
Lindsay, where can this specific map be found today?
So it is in these graphics or in the missing middle housing scan.
So, but in terms of the presentation where you've sort of pulled out these selects, this is not available to us.
It is not in the case file, but I can send you direct page references after the meeting.
Yeah,
for
thank
sure.
you.
Yeah, definitely. So generally these are more walkable urban cores and traditional neighborhood areas, as opposed to neighborhoods that are developed solely towards automobile use. And that would be the one on the far right, more cul-de-sacs, stuff like that. So the process, this is identified in the initial memo. I'm not going to go all the way through this, but the main thing is that the first 2 steps in this process have already been completed via the missing middle housing scan. We've identified these neighborhoods, and we've identified the barriers to missing middle housing in the city. Opticos completed a really thorough analysis of our current zoning code of RN2, 3, 4, and 5. So now we're at the phase of implementation. So for implementation, again, we work with that target area. apply findings of the scan to target areas, use a form-based code approach to fit desired building types to actual lot sizes, and then incorporate design standards to ensure compatibility with the neighborhood. That recommendation 25 on the slide talks about the clear standards that are necessary to incorporate missing middle in existing neighborhoods. So again, instead of selective increases or decreases to the existing standards, which may create unintended consequences if they're applied citywide or contradict other sections of the code or adopted plans, we would recommend following this process. And this process that staff has laid out here is different from the amendments in front of you today, which I'm going to go through now. These would apply to zoning districts throughout the city of Knoxville. So I'm going to just provide a very brief summary of the amendments, and then I'm going to hit the high points of the analysis by planning and plans review and inspection staff. I'm not going to be able to hit all of the analysis points, so I would just refer you to each case file for the additional commentary. So 8A focuses on the residential code, and some of the major points include adding a definition of detached multifamily dwellings, which is a collection of detached single-family or two-family structures on one lot. That's the definition provided in the application. And it's added as a permitted use to the RN 3, 4, 5, and 6. The other major one here is changing a duplex from a special use to a permitted use in the RN1 and RN2 zoning districts. And then finally, the applicant proposes changing the minimum front setback in the RN2 from 20 feet to 10 feet, or the average of the block, with a minimum of 5 feet. So that's 5 to 10 feet in the RN2 zone. Some of the points identified by staff in this analysis, the detached multifamily dwelling, that would require additional dimensional standards. That doesn't include a number of unit count. Instead of that basic definition provided in the amendment. Also, our city code already allows for multiple dwellings on one lot in the RN 3 through 7 and via pocket neighborhoods. So we do have a route through to accommodate that. And yes. Most of the modifications to the purpose statements would require amendments to the one-year plan, the land use classification table, and the use matrix. And then this is kind of throughout. The application references recommendations in the missing middle housing scan. However, they don't always correspond with the proposed amendments. So for example here, front setbacks are not actually identified as a barrier to missing middle housing in the RN2, 3, or 4 districts. And then reducing front setbacks in the RN2 to 5 to 10 feet or 5 feet minimum would be inconsistent with most block faces in the city. And again, these would be applied citywide. 8B focuses on the CN zone. The CN zone was not evaluated by the missing middle housing scan. Some of the proposals include eliminating the minimum corner side setback in the CN zone, reducing a minimum rear setback, and then establishing new standards when the CN zone features residential uses only. The last one, that's challenging because additional language would be required to clarify residential uses only. Obviously, buildings uses can and do change over time, so something may be built differently from a way that it is used 10 years in the future. Scale is a common point in the analysis you'll read multiple times. Going back to that definition of missing middle housing as house scale and compatible with the context. Here, reducing the setbacks would, in a blanket fashion, brings up questions of scale and compatibility with the neighborhood. Finally, there are concerns about utility and drainage easements in the subdivision regulations. 8C pertains to the accessory dwelling unit code. So the applicant proposes eliminating the owner-occupied requirement for accessory dwelling units, removing the minimum lot size requirement, decreasing minimum rear setbacks, and increasing the potential sizes of ADU by removing the maximum gross floor area requirement, increasing the height to 30 feet tall or the height of the primary structure, whichever is greater, and then increasing the ratio of the ADU to the primary dwelling from 40% to 50% max. So again, the analysis does come back to scale, increasing the height the ratio and the gross floor area would result in structures that are larger and taller than the original intent of the ADU, which would be accessory to the primary dwelling. There are also stormwater management concerns and conflicts with the utility and drainage easements from the subdivision regulations. 8D addresses the parking code. So there are items on interior side setbacks for parking lots, but the primary element here is removing parking requirements for almost all residential uses: single family, two family, townhouse, multifamily. So in the analysis side of that, eliminating parking requirements for almost all residential uses in every zoning district in the city would create unintended consequences. The middle housing scan focuses on parking reductions and working with the parking code in the middle housing areas that are within short walking distances of amenities. And not every neighborhood in the city has access to sidewalks, transit, amenities, etc. There's also an amendment providing an exemption where adequate street parking exists. However, adequate street parking, that's a subjective term. It's a concept that would require additional definition and a comprehensive parking analysis to quantify and define what adequate means. Finally, 8E touches on the landscaping code. The missing middle housing scan didn't identify landscaping plans or buffers as a barrier to the creation of middle housing. One main item here is requiring a landscaping plan approval prior to the certificate of occupancy instead of prior to the issuance of a building permit. And plans review and inspection staff identified this as an issue because typically landscaping is a lower priority in development, and sites may not have enough space to implement landscaping if it's planned just before construction is complete. And then they would have to seek alternative landscape design applications. So in general, the staff recommendation is to follow the process identified by the consultant. And then that's a lot of information, so I would just recommend that you guys refer back to the analysis in each of the files and then the missing middle housing scan on our website. And I'm happy to answer any questions or make any clarifications. Go back to any of the slides if y'all have questions.
Lindsay, just to clarify, did the applicant write these amendments?
The applicant wrote yes. Well, the applicant made alterations to the existing zoning code. And those are the text that's provided in your case file. These are the summaries right here were written by staff. And so the amendment text that the applicant proposed, it's in Times New Roman font. It's got some additional colors in here. It's the first one in your case file, and it says proposed amendment text in the top left.
Lindsay, I don't know if it's far enough along in the process for what the city is already working on, but is there anything that speaks directly to parking requirements in the work that the city is either currently undertaking or planning to undertake?
Yes. The city and planning staff, plans review and engineering are evaluating the parking requirements associated with these missing middle housing forms. There will be a parking element of it. It hasn't been developed fully yet, but yes, there will be.
I've got a few questions. So when it comes to setbacks, side setbacks or front setbacks, I can understand on some small lots where reducing those makes sense. But then also if this is blanket across the entire city, you've got large lots. You don't need to have just 5 feet setbacks on a 100-foot wide lot. So how does the missing middle housing scan recommend handling setbacks with various types of missing middle housing?
So the middle housing scan recommends regulating dimensional standards by the building type, similar to a form-based code. So in the report, it goes through the different forms of middle housing. There's a stacked duplex where there's one on top of the other, side-by-side, triplex, quadplex. And the aim is to regulate those dimensional standards, side setbacks, front setbacks, by the building form to ensure that that form fits within the lot. And in some instances, there can be a range. so that the person building the property can kind of work within that. And they also correspond to lot width.
So recently, City Council passed a resolution to have the planning staff look at allowing duplexes by right within RN2, along with lot coverage requirements with it. Is that right, Ms. Brooks?
That's correct.
Okay, so that would be something that would be coming down to us in the next few months or so, or?
Yes.
Okay.
That applies citywide.
Yeah. Have there been any CN residential projects in the city that we know of?
I believe so. Yes, but I don't, off the top of my head, we could get back to you unless one of the staff remembered the details, but
There have been some CN rezonings where the anticipated development was
Right.
residential.
So CN doesn't have a strict, I guess when I've looked at CN, it doesn't seem to be too strict on defining like the number of units that can fit within that zone. So reducing the setback would just kind of allow potentially more within CN. I guess we can talk about this more on Thursday, but I guess I would worry about a lot of people trying to like gravitate towards a sort of vague description on what CN could be. But, and then one other question, when it comes to, I noticed a lot of these reports cite subdivision regulations. I guess I'm not quite clear on all of the lots that have been platted already in the city, and I know on new plats, it's very clear that there are, 5-foot easements between lots and 10 abutting public roads or alleys. But like old lots in the city where I feel like a lot of this missing middle is intended to go, were those understood to be dedicated at the time in terms of easements?
I can kind of speak to that a little bit. I'd say no, it'd be a case-by-case basis. So depending on when the UND easements came into being and any property that was platted after that, then yes, they would have those dedications. But they also have the option to release those easements through a new plat. But yeah, so they would be looking at a case-by-case basis.
Okay. Thanks.
Can I, real quick? We seem to have looked at, over the last couple of years, allowing certain things to be applied for through a special use permit in different zones. We've broadened the ability to ask for things, to be a little more flexible with people doing new things and new ideas and that sort of thing. Is there a thought from staff that some of these ideas that seem fairly new, that might not fit in a nice, neat box today, might be able to be added to a chart that would allow for somebody to submit for a special use permit, and we look at these things on a case-by-case basis? Or are we not going to do anything with this other than what the scan tells us to do? I'm just curious how you get from the scan to practical application.
I think as Lindsay mentioned, the application of the recommendations from the missing middle housing scan are not intended to apply citywide. So
Right.
the idea is to make it easier in the areas that it makes more sense for these, and to reduce additional barriers for people to develop this type of housing there. We have discussed if there are some types of missing middle housing forms that should be still remain as special use, but that's still under discussion.
Okay.
I have a question about what Commissioner Shelso brought up, which is the city council's sending the request for RN2 to be reviewed for duplex by right. And the amendments that we are looking at right now, which seem to include some of that same element. And seems like it's coming from both sides, but that there's also a recommendation from staff to really look at pursuing this through the process that already exists. We're getting that communication through the assessment here, but we're not getting that from the city council coming our direction. So I guess my question is, what city council is sending back to us, that's going to go through staff as well before it comes to planning commission?
Yes, that's correct. Thank you, Lindsay. Okay, now we'll turn it over to Jesse to talk about Level 2 review, hillside protection. I believe this is the first one since the code went into effect in January of 2020.
Okay, so this is item number 6 on the agenda, case 8A23HPA. And this is the first level 2 hillside protection certificate of appropriateness to come before the Planning Commission. Typically, the hillside protection COAs are handled at the administrative level by planning staff who verify that a grading plan for a proposed development is staying within the disturbance budget provided by a slope analysis. This COA comes before you because the applicant is requesting to exceed that disturbance limit. This parcel is 31.4 acres, and it's located on the northeast side of Central Avenue Pike, south of its intersection with Callahan Drive. Approximately 24.8 acres of the parcel is within the hillside protection overlay, and that includes slopes that are greater than 40%. The applicant is requesting to exceed the allowed disturbance area of 14.17 acres by an additional 11 acres for an attached townhouse development. The requested disturbance equates to the entirety of the HP overlay area. The basis for this request is that the disturbance permitted by the slope analysis is almost entirely taken up by a previously disturbed 14-acre TVA easement that runs across the rear and southern side of the parcel. The easement is not a buildable area for townhomes. So this is the zoning. Sorry. So this property is zoned RN3. It's the general residential neighborhood district. In addition to the HP overlay zoning, there's also a small area of floodplain overlay zoning where Knob Fork Creek crosses the northernmost corner of the parcel. The parcel to the south used to be zoned agricultural, but was recently rezoned RN6. This map will be updated soon to reflect that. So how this HP overlay is treated in this case could have an impact on future hillside development, such as this large parcel to the south. The land use classification for this property is the NC1 Mixed Use Special District in the North City Sector Plan. This classification specifically calls out how important it is that development foster conservation of steep slopes. Here's the HP overlay, where you can see that most of the slopes are below a 25% grade with the yellow and green, but there is a significant amount that exceeds 25%, and some that exceeds 40%. Approximately 6 acres in total exceed 25%. As you can see in this aerial view, much of the hillside protection area has already been cleared for that TVA easement, and thus is unbuildable for townhouses. This 14-acre easement essentially consumes the allowable disturbance for the parcel, and most of the remaining HP overlay has not ever been previously disturbed. In particular, the center portion, which has slopes exceeding 25%. So here. The applicant is proposing to essentially disturb the remainder of the parcel outside of the TVA easement in order to develop 103 townhouses. This would mean disturbing the entirety of the remaining HP area. The applicant's request to clear and grade the remainder of the undisturbed HP overlay is based on an exception provided in the HP overlay standards in Article 8.9. The standards provide 4 exceptions for the disturbance regulations, and the 4th one reads as follows. Lots that have been previously legally disturbed or developed are accepted, provided that any new or additional disturbance does not exceed the previously disturbed area or the maximum land disturbance permitted by Table 8.6, which is essentially our slope analysis, whichever is greater. It is the applicant's argument that the plain language of this provision permits the 11 additional acres they wish to disturb because it does not exceed the numeric value of the previously disturbed area, which is 14 acres, or the disturbance budget, which is 14 acres. The applicant approaches these as separate, unrelated considerations, so this property should be entirely exempt from the HP overlay restrictions. So staff are recommending approving COA, but only for 5.23 acres, not the 11 acres requested. This disturbance calculation is based on an alternative slope analysis that was conducted for just the buildable area of the lot outside of the TVA easement. So we understand that there's practical development considerations there. The applicant's argument regarding the previous disturbance exemption, if that was taken to its logical conclusion, no hillside protection area would actually be protected so long as development was conducted in phases of disturbance. So if you were allowed to disturb 10 acres, you did, and you came back and said, I'd like to disturb another 10 acres that doesn't exceed what was previously disturbed or the disturbance budget, you could do so. So as long as you phased your development, you could clear the entirety of any hillside protection area. So as I said before, this is the first level 2 COA to come before the Planning Commission. If approval is granted to clear the entirety of this hillside protection overlay based on the applicant's argument, I fear it could have grave consequences regarding the enforceability of the hillside protection overlay in the city. The stated purpose of the adopted hillside and ridgetop protection plan is to protect the forested ridges and hillsides that are a defining feature of our natural heritage. And a primary contributor to clean air, water, and wildlife habitat. This alternative slope analysis we are proposing is consistent with Article 16.8, which describes that the Planning Commission can review deviations from the hillside protection regulations and approve with conditions, or deny the application. So our recommendation with this alternative slope analysis takes into account practical considerations for development, while still maintaining the enforceability of the hillside protection overlay as intended by the ordinance. I'm happy to answer questions.
Jesse, you said that the plot south of there or next to it is RN6. Is that in your diagram? It looks like it's still AG, or is
Yeah.
it the one on the other side?
No, it just hasn't been updated yet. It's a very recent rezoning
Okay.
that came before you all, and it was approved for RN6.
Okay, and so usually what happens in these cases, if it came before, someone brought this application to you, to planning staff, it would be up to planning staff and codes to agree on, or to come down with a decision. And do I understand because he didn't accept that decision, or the applicant didn't accept the decision, it's now before Planning Commission?
So typically, we conduct a slope analysis, which provides that disturbance limitation. You can disturb so many acres. And then we apply the grading plan for a proposed development to that to ensure that it's staying within that disturbance budget. And it's really just making sure that it is. So it's a pretty standard, numeric procedure to provide that certificate of appropriateness. The reason this level 2 COA is coming before you is because they are asking to exceed that and essentially disturb the entirety of the overlay. So it's Article 16 allows you to consider deviations from the hillside protection.
Is there any way to amend the language on that disturbance limitation so that developers aren't phasing it out in a way where they are taking advantage of that hillside protection?
There could be a proposed ordinance amendment.
So I don't know if anybody else, and I haven't had an opportunity to read it, but I think there's been a document uploaded as well. And I think a lot of it is really maybe comes down to more of a legal description or interpretation of how it's been worded. So I don't know if you've had a chance to look at it or.
I just got that this morning right before I was walking into agenda review, so I will study that and hopefully be able to.
Yeah, I think it'd
consult
be
you
great.
all.
Yeah, because I don't think it's necessarily something where people are trying to circumvent anything, but it's trying to understand, what it does allow and doesn't allow. So, and I'll take a look at it too. I haven't had an opportunity to read it as well.
And I'll just add that in our packet, we do have a letter from Plans Review and Inspections verifying that our interpretation is theirs.
When it comes to a level 2 for the planning commission, are there criteria that the code cites as why we would go beyond the limit?
Yeah, well, yes. So in the process for the overlay, yeah, so, in staff's judgment, if the application meets the requirements of Article 8.9, that's the level 1. If there are matters where it may be deviating from Article 8.9, this is up to Planning Commission. They evaluate based on the evidence presented at the hearing. And the approval standards are a little bit below here. So these are the standards. So, yeah, it's pursuant to the guidelines in the adopted plan, this code and other adopted plans. So I did share with you how the sector plan recommends conserving slopes. The hillside and ridgetop protection plan does account for flexibility in considering development needs, but also balancing the intent of the plan.
Okay.
And the code provides for that as well. You consider whether it's in harmony with the general purpose intent of the code. And you really look at it on a case-by-case basis.
Yeah, so it's kind of subjective and up to us, it seems. Can you pull up that site plan real quick?
Yeah. This is just a...
Okay, thanks.
So you can see the TVA easement line is here. So they're requesting to disturb, what's remaining, essentially.
So the property goes all the way back to the railroad, is that right?
Yes. Yeah, 14 acres is taken up by that TVA easement.
So the TVA easement is 14 acres? And,
Yes.
And how much is the front area? Maybe,
The remaining portion,
right.
so like 16.5 acres. You can see in the packet, there's, the original slope analysis for the entire parcel, and then there's this revised one for just what's buildable.
Okay,
If this
thank you.
were done in reverse, would TVA be subjected to the hillside protection? Are they exempt?
That's a good question. I don't know how our local regulations interface with
We would need to
TVA.
verify, but I would assume they would be exempt.
I would think so.
So from a density perspective, I see we're RN3 there, but the neighboring parcel is RN6. Is that what I heard earlier?
Yes, and that was approved, if you read in that rezoning recommendation, based on the fact that the hillside protection overlay is in place to protect disturbance limitations.
So if this were zoned RN6, would that change the density of it, or is the way it would, or you're saying it would still fall
If-
under
If
area?
this was zoned RN6, it wouldn't change the disturbance budget. So the amount of area that could be disturbed.
Actually disturbed, yeah, but you could probably do more density right there, but not disturb anymore, is what you're saying.
As long as it met the dimensional standards, yes.
Okay.
And I'll add that there is in RN3, this would be a special use as well. So there would be that review, which is on hold until this COA is evaluated.
Thank you. We'll move on to the next one. This is a revision from an application that you all reviewed last month.
Yeah, I'll be brief on this one since we did review it last month, but the applicant, so this is the one in Oakwood Lincoln Park. It's a 0.67 acre property on Chickamauga Avenue. Originally, the applicant was considering a multifamily development, which is why RN4 was requested. Since then, the applicant changed their plans and revised their request to RN3, which does not permit multifamily, but can consider townhouse development through the special use process. So this property is in an area that's predominantly RN2, though it is adjacent to an RN5 parcel, which is an outlier. And there are 2 RN5 apartment communities at the edge of the neighborhood to the west. So the Oakwood Lincoln Park neighborhood plan adopted in 2006 describes how multi-unit housing should be designed in a way that's compatible with the surrounding neighborhood. This sentiment is codified in the, is codified in the infill housing overlay that was added for this area in 2007, which describes how multi-unit housing, which is how a townhouse development would be considered in this overlay, would need to be designed to continue the architectural rhythm of the block, the build-to line, the parking should be in the rear. So what was presented at Planning Commission last month would not have been permitted, just to be clear. Also, what is existing next door is not, that apartment complex would not be something that's permitted according to our standards now either. So we are recommending approving RN3 because there are multiple layers of review for townhouse development should that be proposed. There's the design review board, which would apply the infill guidelines. There's the special use review, which also takes into account neighborhood compatibility and impacts on traffic and adjacent properties. And then there's the principal use standards, which do affect the materials that can be used and the facade, and those would be applied both during special use and at the permitting stage. So because of these numerous, compatibility reviews, and the fact that this property is located near numerous recreational, educational, commercial, and transit amenities, we are recommending approval.
Would they come before Planning Commission to get special use approval first or go to DRB first?
We would typically recommend that they go through the design review board and get a COA. Sorry, we would recommend that they go through the design review board first and have the COA, and we coordinate a pre-review with the principal use standards as well, so they're aware of the different standards by which it would be evaluated by the Planning Commission too.
So this last item is item number 24, 8F23RZ. This is a 20.67 acre parcel in the county on Tipton Station Road, which is a major collector street just south of Governor John Sevier Highway. The request is to rezone from agricultural to planned residential with a density of up to 5 dwelling units per acre. Much of the surrounding zoning is agricultural, but there are numerous PR zone subdivisions ranging in densities of 3 to 5 dwelling units per acre that are in close proximity. This property is in the planned growth area of the growth policy plan. The South County Sector Plan's land use classification is low-density residential, which permits consideration of PR up to 5. The subject property also has a stream protection overlay at its southwest corner, where there is a stream that feeds into Stock Creek to the south. PR zoning is designed to accommodate these kinds of environmental constraints. As you can see in this aerial view, where there has been concentrated residential development in the immediate area, the subject property is actually a bit of an outlier, considering that it's a large agricultural lot next to a high school and among numerous subdivisions along Tipton Station Road and Coatney Road. Staff are recommending approval of the PR zone up to 5 dwelling units per acre because it's consistent with surrounding development, as there are 6 PR zone subdivisions in close proximity between 3 and 5 dwelling units per acre. With all of these residential subdivisions, there is full utility infrastructure here with sewer and water. This property has walkable access, as you can see in this image. There are sidewalks extending to the high school to the east, to Bonnie K. Elementary School to the west. There is a greenway trail, which is essentially a sidewalk, leading to a library, and there's also a park with a playground and soccer field. So given the close proximity to all of these community facilities and the development pattern here, we are recommending approval. There has been a lot of community concern about this rezoning. The major concerns have been school capacity, so I'll just remind everyone that we do provide these types of residential rezoning reports to the relevant school districts, and they have an opportunity to engage in this planning process should they have capacity concerns. With regards to traffic, anything over, any development plan that's over 750 daily trips would have to go through a traffic impact study, and improvements may need to be made. And then residential character would also be a part of the development plan review criteria. That would be a public process as well, allowing public input. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Jesse, on the property across Tipton Station that on one of the maps here says it's 1 to 4 dwelling units per acre, is that built out to 4?
I would need to verify that, and I can follow up.
Yeah, I'm just curious about the other. Looks like there's a 1 to 3 and a 1 to 4, but that doesn't necessarily mean the build out is.
And there's also a PR at 5 on the other side of South Doyle High School.
Is that the water tower signal station switch? That development?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
Now we'll turn over to Michelle.
And this is item number 21. It's 7G23RZ. We talked about this a little bit last month, but there was an error in the staff report. So the applicant had indicated that they were asking for the front portion of the property that's zoned PR, when in actuality it was supposed to be the rear portion. So they asked to postpone it, and we've corrected the staff report to show all of the changes. So I'll just be really brief, again, because the reasoning is the same. It's just the section of the parcel that's being rezoned that's changed. So the applicant's asking to go from PR with a density of 12 dwelling units per acre to the CA zone. It's on Asheville Highway. This is Breakville Road right here, and it turns into Neal's Landing, so just to kind of give you the lay of the land. The zoning map, you can see that this parcel is outlined in yellow. It's only a partial rezoning, that rear PR portion, so it's got dual zoning on it with CA here in the middle, PR, and then PR. And looking at past rezoning cases, there's been a number of rezonings to various different zones, but you can see along Asheville Highway, a lot of commercial zoning. Sector plan map, same thing. It's a big swath of CC, community commercial, which lists CA as zone to consider. And the existing land use shows that a variety of uses is prevalent along Asheville Highway. So there's commercial, office, a little bit of industrial over here, some public, quasi-public, and then a lot of undeveloped land. Most of the residential development is along side streets off of Asheville Highway. Looking at street view, you can see that it is obviously geared towards heavy traffic. It is a classified roadway. It's got divided median for turn lanes and things like that, which makes it ideal for commercial development. However, it does abut some residential properties. This one's currently under development, and this one's, pretty, as you can see, built out. And there is, however, well, come back up in here. So right now, it's kind of located at a small commercial node. There's a food city and some other commercial development directly across the street. There is a stream that kind of comes along through here along the northern property line, and then another one that comes down from the north down to this way, which you can see a little bit better without the case turned on. So those streams provide a natural barrier between the commercial property and the residential properties. And then also it should be noted that the applicant would need to meet the requirements of the Knox County Stormwater Ordinance, and that would be reviewed during the design phases. I know that's some of the concerns that the neighbors have, is the potential for flooding. And this is just, again, to kind of turn those layers off so you can see more clearly where the stream lies. And then you can kind of see from the street view, the property is pretty flat, and then this stream kind of follows back through here, so no site constraints or anything like that. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Is there a non-disturbance buffer that they have around that stream?
Yes, yeah, there would be, since it's county, it would be a 25-foot buffer on both sides.
Thank you, Michelle. Turn over to Whitney to cover 8J23RZ.
Okay, so number 27, 8J23RZ. This is a rezoning request in an existing subdivision that is zoned RAE exclusive residential to RA low density residential. The lot is 163 square feet, or 0.76 acres. It's along River Drive, which is a local road. It's just Asheville Highway on the Clinch River. This property is within the planned growth area, and the sector plan is LDR. And this is somewhere that RA can be considered. It's also within the 100-year FEMA floodplain and hillside protection. There have been no RA rezonings in this area in recent years to warrant a change. The only existing RA zoning within the subdivision is a church at the end of the block. It has access to Oak Ridge Highway. It's on a much larger lot than any of the other single-family residences within the subdivision. In the RA zone, the minimum lot size for a lot with a single-family dwelling is 20,000 square feet if sewer is not provided. The RA zone allows duplexes and garage apartments on the same lot as a house with a use on review approval. And that's what the applicant intends to do, is to build a garage apartment. So built out at a maximum capacity, this lot could be developed with up to one additional unit at 2.63 dwelling units an acre. And so the recommendation is to deny the LDR deny the low density residential zone because it's inconsistent with the surrounding development. Despite the fact that it is aligned with the adopted plans, we're not recommending approval since it's out of character with the area and it doesn't meet all the criteria of the rezoning. In particular, the proposed amendment shall be necessary because of the substantially changed or changing conditions in the area. Are there any questions?
Thank you, Whitney. Now And we're going to move on to agenda item number 9, 8D23RZ.
So this request is to rezone the property on Sanders Lane from RN2 to the RN4 district. The HP overlay will be retained. The property is in East Knoxville within the boundary of Morningside Heights Homeowners Association. It's located south of the 5 Points redevelopment by KCDC, the red highlighted area. This property is an area that's predominantly RN2, though it is adjacent to an RN6 zoned 5 Points redevelopment parcel to the west. The land use classification is traditional neighborhood residential, which permits consideration of RN4 zoning. The neighborhood primarily comprises single-family units. However, north of the subject property, there are 2 duplexes on a RN2 parcel, which align with the dimensional standards of the RN3 district. This portion, the west portion of the 5 Points redevelopment parcel is a forested hillside, as you can see in the aerial image. According to the slope analysis, 26% of this property should remain undisturbed. The access road Sanders Lane is only about 12 feet wide and it terminates at the north end. The connection to Bethel Avenue was closed recently when KCDC started the development along Bethel Avenue. Staff recommends approving RN3 instead of RN4. RN3 zoning at this location will allow development that is consistent with the duplexes to the north. At the same time, RN3's restrictive density and building height will be more suitable for the single-family dwellings in the area. The narrow street and sloped side are more suitable, more compatible with the density allowed by the RN3 zoning. As an additional context, the property owner is intending to build 5 townhouses and trying to get a reduced rear setback variance from BCA. Here we can see the maximum allowed dwelling units and building heights. Do you have any questions?
Just a couple. Did you say that they're actively trying to get variances with BZA?
Yes, they have an application for the month of August.
Okay. And also kind of unrelated to this, I noticed there's a there's a historic overlay, like a few parcels over. Just out of curiosity, what is the purpose of, does anybody know?
Looks like a church.
Okay, I thought it was vacant, so.
So on the historic map, this is one I've wondered about and not been able to find too much research. It says underground railroad site. There, yeah, so it's that L-shaped property that fronts Fuller Avenue and then crosses over to McConnell Street. I haven't been able to find a bunch of information on that one in our files, but I will look into that further and follow up with you because it's interesting.
We'll turn over to Mr. Reynolds for the next 3, item number 25, 30, and 32.
Okay. 8G23RZ. This request is for rezoning from agricultural to RB general residential. The staff recommendation is to deny the RB because it is inconsistent with the growth policy plan, which I'll show you in just a moment. As you can see, let me actually make this bigger. Sorry. Here we go. So get my laser pointer on. There we go. Property is here. It's currently, so this is the existing land use map. This is in the rural area in the growth policy plan, but it is built out with a significant amount of single-family residential type uses. Not zoning-wise, it is compatible with the growth policy plan, with the exception of the RB zoning that's adjacent to this property. And so here's the growth policy plan. The nearby is the planned growth area, but it is disconnected. So this subdivision is zoned planned residential up to 3 dwelling units per acre, which I'll show you here. That was rezoned just after the growth policy plan was adopted in the year 2000. It did only go up to 3 dwelling units per acre, which was the maximum allowed, which is still the maximum allowed by the growth policy plan. Separate rezoning happened last year, in 2022. It was this RA property, which is in the rural area, but adjacent to the planned growth area. RA zoning is not recommended in the rural area in the growth policy plan, but it was approved through County Commission. RB zoning, which is what they're requesting, is not allowed in the growth policy plan rural area either. Kind of a unique situation here with this site is it is in the low-density residential land use classification in the sector plan, which typically we don't see in the rural area in the growth policy plan. Low-density residential would allow consideration of RA zoning, but the growth policy plan designation does not. Just a real quick kind of overview of what the property looks like and its surrounding, but it is just surrounded by neighborhoods that are, single-family uses for the most part. Anybody have any questions? Okay.
Thank you. Yeah.
The next one, I wanted to mainly go over this because the staff report came to you late. This is 8SA23C, so this is a modification to an approved subdivision. So what you're seeing highlighted in red is the area that they're changing. The rest of the subdivision was originally adopted or approved in 2018 for 119 detached lots. It also had 22-foot wide roads and 40-foot right-of-way. So basically the portion of the property already developed, so it was substantially within the hillside protection area. So the reduced road widths and right-of-way widths was an attempt to help reduce the amount of disturbance required for this subdivision. This phase 2 portion, which they're changing to attached units, is largely outside of the hillside protection area, so it's really not the reduced pavement widths and right-of-way widths are less than important. In 2020, staff approved a modification to the original subdivision, reducing a road length here, which crossed a creek, also reduced the number of lots. And then in 2022, we administratively approved a few more lots at the end of Jumping Jack Lane, which they show on their plan. Ultimately, this will reduce detached lots by 39, have 57 attached lots, so it's an 18 lot increase somewhere on there. And in this new section, it's going to have 26-foot wide roads with a 50-foot right-of-way. This is just showing what the original plan looked like versus what they're proposing now. So condition number 4, this so you know, if you're reading through the conditions and get kind of confused on what this is talking about, basically I'm asking them to provide an updated concept plan to staff that shows the accurate area zoned planned residential on their property. So what it's just showing here is their survey shows a 44 plus acre tract, which is what they're stated on their plan, but that includes some of the public right-of-way, which is shown in blue, and also a little area zoned agricultural in the southwest corner of the property. So those are not zoned planned residential, or not their property. Does not impact their request with density or anything, just want to get accurate information. So we all know going forward how much actual planned residential zone they have. So there's a couple of variants, a variance and alternative design standard that we were trying to work out with the applicant. So they are, this is only a part of the subdivision, but everything in blue, I've kind of ticked there, is a frontage less than 20 feet. Anything that's in red is a frontage between 20 and 25 feet. Both of those things require different types of approvals by the Planning Commission. So for attached houses, the Planning Commission can approve a lot frontage less than 25 feet, which is typically the minimum amount allowed for residential lots, if guest parking is provided. Here, they're not providing they're not creating off-street guest parking, but I'll show you in a moment what they have provided to justify the reduction. So the lots that are less than 20 feet, they have less than 25 feet of frontage, those require a variance technically through the Planning Commission. Alternative design standards and variances are just handled a little bit differently, but ultimately the intent here is that we want to make sure that guest parking can be provided and that the frontage that they are providing can adequately serve the lot. So their driveway, utility access, and that kind of stuff. They do show on this plan that they can accommodate about 17 parking spaces just like curbside, so on-street parking essentially. In a lot of attached to residential developments, you can't find hardly any on-street parking opportunities, but the way this development has the roads that curve and the separation between units, it actually can provide some. So that's part of the reason why they provided this 26-foot wide road, because if they provide a 22-foot wide road, you really can't provide on-street, like real true on-street parking without causing some problems. So they went with a wider road so that on-street parking became more feasible. Anybody have any questions?
Are these private roads?
They're public. So what I'm showing is on-street parking. It's really just curbside, just parking on the road. There's not sidewalks in this section that I can tell? There's not. Okay. Yeah.
Thank you, Mike. Go on to item number 32.
Yeah. Item number 32, it's 8A23UR. So the request is for 3 duplexes in the RA zone. RA zone requires use under review approval for duplexes. There's a minimum lot size of 12,000 square feet, which these all meet. So lot number 1, which is the south side, the lower part of this plan, is they're proposing to access through an existing access easement. There's a couple properties behind that use this as well. Lots 2 and 3, which would be new lots, would access through a shared permanent access easement through a property on Belt Road. That property owner is in agreement to allow that easement and driveway. Issue that we run into is with the 3 duplexes, they actually exceed the 5 dwelling unit per acre maximum density allowed in the low density residential land use. So staff is recommending that we approve, or the Planning Commission approve, duplexes for the 2 lots, like lots 2 and 3, and basically lot 1 just would not be approved. That would bring the density down below 5 dwellings per acre. They could still build a single family house on that lot, and that lot would then, I guess the access that they're using would be more consistent with the existing access. There's already a home on that property, so that the type of access really wouldn't change then for the other property owners that use that access easement. Just real quick, zoning, you can see this zoned RA within the general vicinity. This is in South Knoxville, by the way, not too far from Alcoa Highway. Low density residential in the land use plan. This kind of gives you an idea about what's there. This is the driveway that the property currently uses. There's the house behind, and then there's this lot back here that does not have a house on it.
but does use that for access. And there's also a single-family house in front of this lot. So the other two duplexes would go here.
So it's a shared permanent easement?
What they'll have to create is a shared permanent access easement for the two new lots behind, going through the applicant used to own this lot along Belt Road. The current property owner has an agreement to change. When they sold that lot, they created an access easement, but the type of access easement they created wasn't sufficient to allow two new lots. It only allowed one lot, so they're going to change that to a shared permanent access easement instead.
And that type of easement can be used for up to how many lots? What, 5?
5, including the lot that it crosses. So
does that consider like it could be 5 duplexes theoretically, or is it 5?
There's really not enough land back there for more, but
right.
Technically, yes, they could be used for duplexes.
Thank you, Mike. Are there any other items that the Commission would like to discuss?
We are adjourned.